Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chiho Watanabe, moderating this session. And I'm, I would like to thank all of you to coming in here to join this session. And today, using the 90 minutes, we will discuss about the indigenous as well as the local perspective for the planetary health. And I think for those you have already attended the morning sessions, and you have heard from the very powerful speech from the Dr. Ledbus. And I think that we can just follow that direction. And I will, before starting, I will briefly introduce the intention of this session. Okay, so I don't have to explain this so much because we have heard this uh, this several times in this meeting, and already the 6 out of the 9 planetary boundary has been surpassed. So then we are in the edge of the maybe extinction. And also, okay, I think that this click I need to wait 2 seconds. And yeah, if I don't wait, that it's quick, so quick. But anyway, so this is also the representing the SDGs. And also we have heard several times in this conference about the structure of this SDGs. And I think that important, my emphasis here is in the Lancet paper and by Whitney and Tony Capon, who is here, is one of the co-authors of this paper. And they just briefly summarize the health of planet and health of human and its civilization are interdependent. And achievable, the latter health is achievable by the wise stewardship of the natural systems. And this is very good way of saying that this our situation. But I and a colleague of mine just questions about this expression because it says the stewardship. And the stewardship means there's some subject and some object. And subject is the human society, and we are taking care of the object of the nature and ecosystem. So when we have heard or when we see this kind of explanation, we feel that maybe the Japanese way of the looking at the nature is a little bit different. We are not stewarding the nature, but we are more conforming us to the nature. So that's what we have conversed. So this is the basic motivation of the doing this session. And so asked by the Tony, and I just collect some of the examples of how the traditional Japanese see the nature. And maybe Satoyama, many of you are familiar with. And so Satoyama is just steward, under the stewardship of the humanity. And but it's the in between forest and the human society. And Shakei is the mixture of the human-made scenery and natural sceneries. And also, Yao Yorozu no Kami is, we believe that not all of Japanese, but some of us believe that every nature thing, every natural thing like tree or land or maybe rocks or the river, there's some god there. So that we call the Yaoyorozu no Kami. So in this way, the traditional Japanese views the mixture of the humanity and also the nature as one thing. So that's, I think, my traditional Japanese view. So, but starting from this, we can find similar perspective from the Japan, not only Japan, but also the Asian countries, like the sufficient economy is Thailand, gross national happiness in Bhutan, and maybe in the other countries has a similar idea about the relationship between the human societies, activities, and nature. Okay, so regarding the planetary health, when we think about the discussion of the planetary health, we realize that not every people on the world is participating in this discussion. And this is a famous panel, and in the horizontal line, you can see the human development, and vertical line shows the environmental burden. And it clearly shows that when the humans thrives, then your burden to the environment is very huge. So, but most of the discussion, ongoing discussion, is conducted by this group. That they are very rich, not rich, but maybe very thrived, prosperous, but at the same time, they are uh, posing a huge burden to the environment. So maybe then we need to think about the perspective of these groups. And I think that we have heard a lot of things from today's Dr. Redbus speech. So the purpose of this session is to discuss about the views of the global East, so to speak. And as well as the views of indigenous people on the human, sorry, I misspelled indigenous people on human-nature relationship. And exchange the various views on the human-nature relationship. And adding these perspectives would, I hope, broaden the options for the future sustainable great transition pathways. So in this session, we have 4 speakers, and I've heard that the profiles of all speakers can be browsed through some booklet or any materials provided by the conference. So for the time's sake, I just skip the detailed introduction of these speakers. But we start from the Professor Lu and Tuan. He is the College of the Engineering and Environmental and Natural Resources, Kanto University in Vietnam, then followed by this, in this figure, it's third, she's third, and Dr. Ushar Daniele, and she's the editor, and she's serving for the reporter and many media, and currently she's the editor on Vice Asia, Malaysia, and followed by the Professor Kiyoshi Tadokoro, and he is a graduate School of Sociology and Toyo University in Japan. And finally, the final speaker will be the Professor Tony Capon, and as I mentioned, and he is one of the co-authors of the Lancet paper, and he is now serving as the director for the Sustainable Development Institute in the Monash University, Australia. And these are all of these should be the very small, brief, Ignite type talks. And after the short break, we go to the panel discussion. And I hope that we have some time for the Q&A sessions. So that's all. Thanks. So I would like to first invite Dr. Tuan for his talk.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Watanabe for your introduction. And I'm very glad to be here and present some story about the Backup Delta concerning the local professionals. Okay, how to change my presentation? Yeah. Okay, yes. All right. My topic is local and indigenous perspective on human and natural relationship. I focus on the lower Mekong River Basin. I'm working for Cần Thơ University of Vietnam. Cần Thơ is the biggest city in the middle of the Mekong River Delta. It's very important for the Vietnam in agricultural and aquaculture production for the country. Yeah, you know the Mekong River is or sometimes we call the mother stream as a natural shock and for feeding at least 60 million people in the region and export the food for another countries. And we found that agriculture and aquaculture, fishery and forestry production activity are the main livelihood of the more than 70% of the uh, local people living in the rural area. And we can say that almost the agriculture and aquaculture production are dependent highly on the water in the Mekong River Basin. Therefore, the water and the land in the Mekong areas is very important for the local people here. Uh, and we also found that the Mekong Basin is also the most cultural and biodiversity area in the world. And we found many kind of the plant species, fish, birds, reptile, and amphibian species, and many mammal species in the region. And therefore, we can say that this is one of the rich of the biodiversity compared to other places in the world after the Amazon areas. And the river system is the home of the more than 95 different entities group living in the Mekong Basin. And you can see many different culture activity in the region. And almost people living in the Mekong Basin had custom to watch the change of the water uh, in the river and in the rain or side of the chain of ecosystem and know the environmental condition for that can affect it to their life. And they have many experiment and knowledge about it. And the local people and also knows how to plant the trees to protect the water region. As you see in the pictures, there's many coconut trees and other Nippon trees in order to keep the soil and the water and prevent erosion. And they also know how to treat the water for drinking. Also, there is very traditional ways. Uh, and they also have a good practice in sharing the freshwater and water information to their community. And you know, at that time, the drought and the saline intrusion affect strongly to the Mekong Delta, and we had many ways for support the local people in the shortage of the freshwater in present time. And we found that, sorry, it was so fast. And in currency, we had many challenges to the local people and their livelihood in the Mekong River. The first one is climate change and sea level rise is a global effect to the not only in the Mekong Delta but also in the many places in the world. But the Mekong Delta is one of the most heat nest of the due to the global warming phenomena. And we also had some transboundary water problem because the water in the Mekong River flow to different countries from Chinese, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and finally follow to Vietnam before entering the South China Sea. And therefore, the use and the develop of the many water projects in the upstream may be affect to the downstream. And we also facing with some environmental problem like the water pollution and over-exploitation of the resource as well as urbanization having the major impact on the traditional culture and indigenous practice. You know, sometimes in the right season, we cannot organize some boat trading festival in the Mekong Delta. It's because the water is low, very low in the river and canal, and there are some cultural festival have been canceled. And you know, in our parish, and we also thinking that nature also control our activity, and we have thinking that the God of the handle for heaven may control and know what the local people do, and the habit living near river people and the natural ecosystem in the Mekong Delta had a uh, symbiotic relation, including the element of the spiritual life. And you can see the many pagoda and the church and some activities for their life. Like, for example, when they build the boat, they also praise with the god of the river to support them in their daily life. Yeah, we have some discussion there. The modern development is often a trade-off with the traditional practice of the local and indigenous people that need to be considered from the social and human needs perspective. And we need to continue to maintain the good custom and practice what will have the unfair values for the relationship between the social development, social economic development, and the natural resources conversation are an important part of the planetary health. And within that, raising awareness to the education and the mass media communication is one of the good solutions to realize it design. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so if there's any quick question, I can take only one, but maybe then after all the speakers down, and we have a discussion time. So at the time, then you can ask more detailed things. Is it okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, then we will invite the second speaker, Ushar, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I would like to clarify that I am not Dr. Usha Daniel. I am just Usha Daniel. I am a freelance independent journalist. I work for multiple agencies. I produce for Al-Jazeera. I was the former editor for Vice Asia, and I am not Dr. Usha, just to clarify that. So before I begin, I would like to say that I represent the Malaysian indigenous community. Kopi Sanangan. My name is Usha. I'm from Sabah in Borneo. I am a part Dusun. And let me share with you a little bit on our Malaysian indigenous and local perspectives. Who and where they are. So Malaysia is split with the Peninsula Malaysia as well as the island of Borneo. And the indigenous communities are separated to two groups, Orang Asal and Orang Asli. The Orang Asli is comprised of 18 indigenous ethnic groups in Peninsular Malaysia. There is an estimated population of 150,000 of them, with the majority of them living in or close to forests. And they are mostly involved in forest foraging, rice cultivation, traditional hunting, gathering activities, and they are coastal communities as well, like the Mahmeri tribe, which practices fishing for sustenance and a source of income. So Orang Asal is what I identify as from Sabah and Sarawak, which are indigenous groups that are from Sabah and Sarawak. And Sabah's population is made up of 33 indigenous groups that communicate over 50 languages and 80 ethnic dialects. And Sarawak has 27 ethnic groups that spreads across the states. So majority of this population live close or in the forest, with many of the ethnic groups practicing agriculture, farming for subsistence, and also income. So why are indigenous people important? It is important because many indigenous groups in Malaysia have knowledge of the forests and their surrounding areas through cultural practices that has actually been passed on for centuries. And this knowledge are actually sacred practice that been used to conserve their surrounding. Indigenous people across Malaysia have long lived harmoniously and sustainably with nature for generations. So these traditional practices and knowledge are passed down from families to families. And while the word sustainability have grown in its reputation to be a buzzword, this is actually a way of life for many of the indigenous people that are from Peninsular Malaysia as well as Sabah and Sarawak. The indigenous practices may differ both in Peninsula and in Borneo, but the relationship and the respect of nature and the biodiversity they rely on for food, for medicine, for shelter, and income remains a priority. Indigenous knowledge is passed on through the generations have yet to be studied. I mean, there are studies, but there are no in-depth studies, particularly in Malaysia, and there are examples of practices that have been proven beneficial to the communities that conserves the biodiversity they dwell in. So let me start first with the Kadazan Dusun community, and this is practice across Sabah, which is the Tagal system. This is a community-based river fishery conservation system practiced by the Kadazan Dusun community in Borneo. And in Sabah, freshwater fish is actually a vital source of protein for rural communities. And fishing malpractices over the years have actually threatened the river systems and the biodiversity. So Tagal, which means prohibit in the local language or do not, was implemented by the state government in the 1960s. And this was implemented after the state government realized that, hey, it's working for the local indigenous communities. Let's make sure that it is actually implemented as a whole across Sabah. So this system was aimed to protect, to revive and manage freshwater resources for local communities. And the Department of Fisheries, together with the communities, adopted a practice where rivers are actually demarcated to 3 zones. So there's the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone. Why is it not changing? Oh, my apologies. Sorry. Okay, so the Tagal system, the green zone allows communities that live within this area to fish all year long without restrictions. The yellow zone are only open for fishing every 2 years during festive celebration and only for a brief amount of time. So every May, there is a massive harvest festival that happens in Sabah. And this is when usually these rivers are actually open for fishing, but it is closed the moment this festival is done. And the red zone, obviously, it prohibits fishing all year round to allow growth of juvenile fishes within the Tagal zone. Currently, there are 628 Tagal zones within 227 rivers that has been gazetted in Sabah. And this is not only a legal system that's governed by the state government and the fisheries department. Under the native and customary laws, strictly imposed, any malpractices of fishing activities that are prohibited will be penalized. The Tagal system falls under the Sabah Inland Fisheries and Aquaculture jurisdiction and is strictly monitored. So the success of the implementation of the Tagal system has opened up opportunities for the Tagal communities that live within these river zones to generate income through tourism activities. So this system actually empowers the local communities to continuously sustain their river ecosystem, and it demonstrates an importance of the preservation of the ecosystem for a sustainable future. So we're moving on to, we come back from Borneo to Peninsular Malaysia, and let's talk about Orang Asli practices. Orang Asli practices, to them, the forest is more than just a source of food, for medicinal herbs, for economy, for indigenous people in Peninsular Malaysia. The Orang Asli community that dwell close or within the forest in Malaysia actually have spiritual and cultural links to them. The spiritual connection to the land is linked to the community's natural resources management. And the forest is often linked and associated with their ancestral spirits. And this means people cannot freely take from this forest. The belief that the spirits of their ancestors are embodied in the land, and this connection allows the community to practice prudence when utilizing forest resources. Orang Asli communities are often not removed entirely, but they do as well have contact with the modern world, but their preservation of their culture, of heritage, and their beliefs remains. So the Orang Asli communities in Malaysia have long practiced foraging wild herbs and fauna for medicinal purposes. These herbs are used to make natural remedies, and among some of the herbs used in villages and settlements have medicinal value and healing common illnesses. Some examples are the daun ketum, bungaraya, which is hibiscus, pagaga, tongkat ali. And according to researchers that studied green technology that is used to categorize sustainable practice of the usage of herbs by Orang Asli. So the daun ketum can be used for abdominal pain and diarrhea. Bungaraya, the flower itself, can be used for circulation, better blood circulation. The pagaga is used to treat fever, relieve pain, headache, and dizziness. And pagaga is a common herb that not only is consumed and used by the local indigenous communities. I think a lot of Malaysians can also buy this herb and consume it at home. And the tongkat ali is used to provide stimulation and energy to the body, which can also be used to treat fever as well as a male tonic. So there are a lot of challenges faced by indigenous communities in Malaysia. And the first, I think, is indigenous knowledge is a living knowledge that is rarely documented from generation to generation. And I'm speaking on behalf of my own family from Sabah. There are often knowledges where I'm trying to extract and gather information from my aunties or my uncles, and they are unable to give me this information unless I speak in the local language, because none of this is actually documented. So oftentimes this knowledge, as the younger generation grows older, you move to bigger cities, you get access to Instagram, to TikTok, to your phone, to internet, you are no longer interested in indigenous knowledge. So one threat is you may face the loss of indigenous knowledge because there is a lack of documentation. So the combination of cultural practices must be coupled with also scientific research, where then it would be able to be noted down, it will be able to be documented and can be used to achieve successful results to conserve biodiversity. Another challenge that is faced by indigenous communities is actually land encroachment and human rights abuse. And this is a challenge that is not only happening in Peninsular Malaysia, but also in Sabah and Sarawak. And the economic development and rapid need for agriculture and forest farm has caused a rapid increase in customary land encroachment within indigenous lands. And data from Amnesty actually showed that one example in 2020 is where more than 930 hectares of ancestral land claimed by the Tuan community were at risk of having its status as forest reserve removed, which resulted in some 1,000 indigenous peoples being dispossessed of their land for development. Another challenge that is faced by indigenous communities in Malaysia, and this has, through my reporting, this has been quite evident, is the lack of consultation when it comes to indigenous communities. The lack of consultation shows that there is a disregard for the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. And the development surrounding these areas that is usually encroached into are also causing them to lose the way of life. For example, if there is a forest farm that is being developed near an Orang Asli or Orang Asal village, the water quality within these villages and these areas rapidly declines. And these communities highly rely on their water sources, which is directly from the river itself. This impact can affect the quality of life, but also impact a lot of things, their food supplies, their economic development, because many of them rely on the river itself as well as forest foraging for an income. And I think the other challenge that is faced by local and indigenous communities in Malaysia is the lack of access to education and healthcare. This is clearly, there is a massive divide between urban and rural populations. And when it comes to indigenous communities, this group remains marginalized and unaware of their rights. And the only voices that they have to go through is through either reporters like me who are willing to go in and interview them, or you could speak to indigenous groups that are fighting for their rights and when it comes to land encroachment, when it comes to human rights abuses. So that's a picture of me on assignment. This was at the Royal Balloon State Park, where I had the opportunity to interview and film indigenous communities that were actually, they are part of the Munrak team that are they are part of the conservation team protecting our Malayan tiger species. So recommendations is a deeper understanding and respect of indigenous cultures and representation across the board. Cultural practices have long provided sustainable solutions to the communities to prolong their reliance to the forest and surrounding biodiversity. There is also a need for fair and just consultation with indigenous groups across Malaysia. Economic development must go hand in hand with human rights practices to ensure that indigenous people's rights remains protected. Consultation and engagement with communities will foster a deeper understanding of their relationship with nature and how development can work in tandem with their practices. There's also a need for continued advocacy of indigenous rights across the board to educate the general public, stakeholders, decision makers, policy makers, to ensure that these practices to conserve biodiversity is not only for that community that lives within that area, but also for the benefit of our country and the health of our planet, as well as the health of our people itself. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Asha. Sorry for doctor. Okay, any burning or the confirming questions? Okay. Okay, so we proceed to the third speaker, Professor Tadokoro.
Thank you for coming. My name is Kiyoshi Tadokoro from Toyo University in Japan. Thank you for giving such a valuable opportunity. I will introduce a case from the Tewada people. I have spent 2 years among them since 2002 until 2004 for carrying out my fieldwork when I was a grad student. And as for human and nature relationships, several dichotomies came up to my mind, such as culture and nature, human and environment, human and animal, human and non-human. And in this presentation, I pick up human and animal relationships. I want to focus on I want to focus on eel fishing methods. It uses magical spells, so I want to introduce basic concepts of the spells. What I want to show in this presentation is the Tewada see all in the context of right. The Tewada see all beings, including animals, as having personalities, and therefore thinking and acting in the same way as humans. They also see them as being with whom they try to communicate. The Tewada people live in mountainous regions in Papua New Guinea. Their territory is very remote. It takes 3 days by walk from the nearest airstrip. They live in a small village of about 5 households. Each village are scattered in the mountain. They are subsistence farmers, and they have their own language. The population is about 2,000. Now, I will introduce the eel fishing method. First of all, eel fishing involves a spell, and it is a very important part of the method. The basic concepts of magical spell are these. Magical spells use secret names known only to adult males. Every existence has a secret name. The idea of the spell is to call the secret name of the eel. The eel also have a kind of consciousness called duke. And they always realize that they have been called when their secret names are called. In daily life, they use wobo to indicate an eel, but they use kakidamo when they speak to. Only when an eel is called as a kakidamo, they realize that they have been called. And according to Theravada mythology, fish and eels are the transformations of humans. Next, I will show the overview of trap fishing. First, the traps are made by rolling tree bark into a cylindrical shape. Then they put a bait frog on the hook and leave it overnight. Then come back the next morning to check. When they set the bait, they say a magical spell. And I want to explain the procedure of setting a bait from the next slide. Yes, next slide. Sorry. First, they crunch on a stone by the river and bait a hook and the line. And they cast a spell while looking at their own face reflected in the water. They do not enter the river until the end. The spell is like this. Wedamo, Wedamango. That they are secret names of human shadow. And Aidamo. This is a secret name of eel shadow. In daily life, people call the shadow as kie. But during the rite, they use wedamo when they speak to the human shadow. In the same way, when they speak to the eel shadow, they use aidamo. So they treat a shadow as having a personality only during the rite. And the people tell me their interpretation. A shadow leaves when its name is called in order to prevent the shadow from interfering with the eel's feeding. They call the shadow's secret name to drive it away. They also explain shadows have behind rocks, watching for a bait. When eels forage at night, they are frightened away by the shadow of humans and eels. The shadow turns eyes on the eel. Then they proceed to the next step. While muttering a magical spell, hold the middle of the line, hold the middle of the line and drop the baited hook into the water and pull it up again. The spell is like this. Kakidamo, kakidamo, kakidamo. This is the secret name of eel, wabo. Hamuo, hamuo, hamuo. This means there are something. Something means bait. Hibaro, hibaro, hibaro. This means I am living here. People tell me their interpretation. The first word lures the eel. The next word tells the eel that there is food. And the last word tells the eel that I am leaving. They also explain when called by a secret name, the eel's ears open and it can hear the human voice. If the eel is called by its secret name, it will hear and then wait patiently until the night. At night, the eel tries to find the direction of the voice calling. That's all about their way of eel fishing. So based on the data, I want to conclude with the two indications. In the context of rights, the Tewada is trying to interact with the eels and the shadows, which are also conscious and have personalities. The Tewada see all beings, including animals, as having personalities and therefore thinking and acting in the same way as humans. They also see them as beings with whom they try to communicate. So that's all my presentation, and I want to, I'm happy if the data is contributes the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Are there any quick questions? Okay. So now we invite the last speaker, Professor Tony Capon.
Thanks very much, Chiho. Terrific to be with you all here. And in my time, I'd like to speak to a local planetary health initiative in Australia. And I wanted to begin by taking us back to the 2019-2020 bushfire season in Australia. This image here, people sheltering on a beach from those bushfires. And here, the city of Sydney shrouded in smoke for months that summer. And here, Australia's capital, where people were wearing masks to protect themselves from the bushfire smoke before we were wearing masks regularly to protect ourselves from the pandemic virus. And these were the media images around the world from that summer. Those devastating fires made clear to us all that our climate has changed and it's harming the health of all people, and it's also harming the health of all other living things on Earth. It was estimated by ecologists that more than 3 billion animals died in that summer. And the place I want to talk to you about is called the Blue Mountains. And you can see here a story from The Guardian that summer that in that part of Australia, 80% of the Blue Mountains and 50% of the Gondwana rainforests were burnt. This is a World Heritage Area, UNESCO World Heritage listed area to the west of Sydney. Here's a map showing the location of the Greater Blue Mountains area, which was World Heritage listed in 2000. The Blue Mountains there highlighted in red, and you can see it's about 50 kilometers west of Sydney is where it begins. And I think there's another picture here. I'll just get it up. It's a little bit tricky. Oh, let me just go back. This is an image of people observing into the national park. You may have seen these kinds of images before from the Blue Mountains National Park. The Blue Mountains City is one of two cities in the world inside a World Heritage Area. The other city is Banff in Canada. And in the Blue Mountains, we have been working together for more than a decade on planetary health at the local level. And you can see here that in October last year, the City Council released a precinct plan for planetary health parklands in the national park, inside the city. And in fact, you can probably see from that image on the front that this is actually a former golf course in the city that is being reimagined as a place for learning about planetary health. The approach that we're taking is found in an acknowledgement of country, Nara, in traditional language. And in the work, we are closely engaged with two traditional owner groups, David King, in particular, from the Gundungurra people, and Chris Tobin from the Darug people. The mayor and the CEO of the council are completely behind this important initiative. And in fact, the CEO, Rosemary Dillon, you can see there on the right, she has a PhD in anthropology. And this comes from her vision for the future of the city. She's worked in the city for about 30 years. And one of the things that she says, she's worked her way up to be the CEO of the city, and she now has control of the money. And she wants to advance a vision of local planetary health. So the vision, and I won't expect you to read all these words, but the vision of these parklands is a place for learning about planetary health. And it's grounded in this understanding of country, represented, as you can see at the bottom there, moving from a human-centered approach, which is the dominant culture on the left, to a country-centered approach where people are part of nature. And my role in the process has been to bring the understanding of planetary health that we share through the Planetary Health Alliance to this work. Here's a map of the site, and you can see on the image up near the top there, the T is the train station, and the site is down there, highlighted in green. And right down on the bottom right there is Echo Point, where that picture of people at the lookout was taken. So it's a very good location, easy access for people living and visiting the area. Now, it's worth remembering that this work builds on work over a much longer period. Traditional owners over millennia, and more recently with the World Heritage Listing in 2000, the local model of sustainability. So while planetary health is a relatively new term, the local community has been advancing in this direction for many years. And you can see here on the right of these images that there's been an intense phase of activity with the articulation of this plan through community consultation. So as I conclude the remarks, I just wanted to refer to this particular figure, which is the principles that are guiding the work that we're doing in this initiative. And together, we've identified 9 principles. On the left column, you can see principles about a place for doing things, a place for caring for country, for listening and learning from country and traditional owners and custodians, a place for the community, particularly youth, to come together to investigate, innovate, and demonstrate planetary health, a place for learning, discovery, scientific and artistic exploration within the Blue Mountains region. In the middle there, a place which protects, restores, and respects the physical, water, soil, landforms, vegetation, animals, and the intangible kinship stories, spiritual beings. A place which demonstrates and communicates strategies for restoring planetary health, and a place which evolves over time and responds to lessons learned to achieve environmental, social, and economic sustainability. And thirdly, there on the right, a place that provides spaces and supporting structures that are environmentally responsive and integrated within the site. A place that provides flexible, multi-purpose and adaptive structures and spaces which shape interactions and build relationships. And finally, a place that provides international leadership on planetary health through a Blue Mountains lens, because this area is a UNESCO World Heritage listed area. All of it, of course, founded in this understanding of country or Nara in Indigenous language. So that's the final image in my slides. The first initiative that we're doing together with the community is to develop a yarning circle on the site to take these conversations forward. So more information available from this link. Thank you very much, Chiho.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any burning questions? Okay. So I think that my original idea is just taking the 5 minutes break, and then, but for the time's sake, and as it is easily expected that the time is just behind the schedule. So I think that maybe I would like to invite all of the panelists to come up to the podium, and then we will continue the discussion. But those people, particularly in the online, and you can have a time to stretch out your legs, and so then maybe we have a 2-3 minutes break. Okay. Okay, so let's start the discussion. And I think we have heard the different perspective of the indigenous and the local perspectives from the different groups. And Dr. Tuan talked about the views from the Mekong Delta people. And the Mekong Delta people consisted of so many groups, ethnic groups. And so maybe I would ask later about the difference among these groups. And particularly he is focusing on the relationship between the people's livelihood and rivers, nature of the river. And followed by the Ushar, and who talks about the Orang Asli and the Orang Asa. And they have slightly different views on the natures. And her talks also focusing on the river, particularly for the Orang Asli case. And Orang Asa case, I should say. Yeah. And then Dr. Tadokoro talked about the view of the Tewada people, and who is in the Papua New Guinea, and he focused on the traditional way of doing the eel fishing, and where the people just try to communicate with this eel when they do the fishing. And finally, for the final speaker, Tony Capon talks about the project in the Blue Mountain area, and it's due to the big first fire, it has been once burnt. Then during the restoration of this area, they just executed following the principle of the planetary health. So I think that we have had very different stories, but I think that each of the stories has some aspect of the human nature interaction, particularly through the lens of the different traditional groups. So I think that maybe then we can start from this point. And I put some questions, but before getting into these questions, maybe each speakers, if you have any question to the others' talk, or if you would like to complement something to your own talk, maybe I would like to ask you own voice. So maybe starting from anyone, Dr. Tuan.
Okay. In some opinions of most of the people in the Southeast Asian countries, and in general, and in the lower Mekong River basin, humans are the part of the nature, and we must be governed by the nature. And in the Eastern perspective, the heaven is nature, and the God of the heaven own way monitor the human activity in nature to reward them or punish them in the future. And therefore, we had the idea of the contrasting of the planetary health framework. We must find a way to maintain the celebrate ideologies and place of the human natural relationship of the framework in all the sustainable development goals. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Chiho. I would first like to say that I very much enjoyed, not enjoy, I think there is a deep connection between human lives, indigenous lives, and the river. Whenever you have communities living by the river, and particularly in Vietnam, I think it resonates closely to a lot of indigenous peoples in Malaysia. For example, in Sabah, there is the Kinabatangan River, where communities there rely on this river very much, not only for freshwater fish supply, but also for tourism activities. And having gone to the Kinabatangan River myself on assignment, seeing the grandeur of this amazing forest and having to witness an orangutan out in the wild is not only mind-blowing for me, because while I am from Sabah, I grew up in Kuala Lumpur. So I go back to Sabah every year, so I don't really get to experience that. But understanding that the communities that rely heavily on the river also protects this river for their well-being, not only for themselves, but also across, because I think Mekong goes through 4 countries, which I have been lucky enough to see it. And it's amazing, it's fantastic. And particularly your presentation as well, sir, I never had that much in-depth explanation of eels in my life before. And I really, really enjoyed that presentation. And of course, Dr. Tony, your presentation opened my eyes, because understanding the repercussions of the massive fire that happened in Australia is resonating to what happens in Southeast Asia. I think Malaysia and most of ASEAN is impacted by a yearly transboundary haze problem. And this is because of, well, palm oil production. And seeing that, I completely understand seeing the fog of smog choking you. It is relatable, even though different countries, but yeah, something needs to be done, because again, the health of the planet is very important to ensure the health of human beings that reside within it. Every being, not just human beings.
Yeah, I really enjoyed all the talks, and I think one of the great things that we're seeing in this conference, building momentum and the sharing of understanding of Indigenous perspectives in planetary health. I know when we were developing the commission report with the Lancet and the Rockefeller Foundation, now almost a decade ago, the Indigenous voices weren't that prominent. My family is Ngāi Maori from the very south of New Zealand. And when I was based here at United Nations University in Kuala Lumpur, one thing that struck me was the way the voices of Indigenous people in Malaysia weren't prominent. But I can notice a difference a decade later. And I think we're seeing this all around the world in different kinds of ways. And I think this is a very positive thing for planetary health. Yeah.
Yeah. What I want to add information about my presentation is that I studied the dichotomy of human and the animal. But in my idea is that this kind of dichotomy not applied to the local ideas, because the people are thinking the animal in the similar way to think about the human. So the human and animal is not we cannot separate according to the ideas. So this idea is a little bit similar to the Japanese way of understanding the human and the nature. So it's my impression at the moment.
Thanks. So maybe I would like to just ask these three speakers and about what Dr. Tadokoro suggested, that in the many indigenous groups, they see the human and animal is as a kind of the consecutive existence. So how do you think about this kind of the perspective? You observe the similar thing or maybe different type of observation?
Okay, I think I'll take that question. So let me get this right, the coexistence of human and wildlife, and I think it is, well, similarly to your presentations, I think the Tagal system in Sabah is it speaks for itself, how the community relies a lot on freshwater fish. And when this source depletes, they lose their source of main protein, their food. So there is an interconnection between human life as well as wildlife. And if we're looking at Orang Asli perspective, based on my experience covering news, I predominantly make a lot of wildlife documentaries. So understanding the link between human wildlife conflict as well as the harmonious life between human and wildlife is that picture that was in the slide just now where I was speaking to an indigenous man. This particular area itself is where the Jahai tribe lives, and they are one of the smallest, but also the most remote indigenous communities that are in Malaysia. They are Royal Belum Peninsula, Royal Belum State Park, to give you a context, is a 5-hour drive up north, and then you got to get on a boat, and then this boat will take you upstream a river for about 45 minutes, an hour. So there, it's really remote. So this community obviously do not have the access as do you and I, where if you need vegetable, you walk out to get vegetables. So they rely heavily on the forest. They rely heavily on the state park. And they are also given the opportunity to give back because they understand that that is their home. This is where they grew up. This is where they want their children to grow up. And given that we have a dwindling number of the Malayan tiger species, we have less than 150. And a lot of these Malayan tigers are actually within that area itself of that national park. So what happened was the state government, the Perak state, as well as an NGO, RIMAU, decided to, you know what, let's work together. Let's equip this indigenous people with knowledge of using cameras, of using GPS devices. And these people are, it's so remote that they actually do not have access to education. But now they know how to use GPS devices. They know how to record animal tracks because they're given the opportunity to conserve the Malayan tiger species And when I spoke to them and I asked them, why do you do this? And the answer that hit me was, he said it in Malay, and I'm going to translate it for you, which is, I would like my children to also know what a Malayan tiger looks like in person. Because I can't show them a photograph and say, this is a tiger. Of course, we know what a tiger looks like, but being able to see it in person. And this man that I interviewed actually has seen it in person, and it's quite a terrifying story when he told me that, means that there is a deep respect of this animal itself being living within its space. Because when he said he looked a tiger in the eye that was crossing the river, he said it, and there is a belief for indigenous people where you can speak to these animals and they will understand you. And this is not only for the Orang Asli, but this is also for the Orang Asal community in Sabah and Sarawak. So this man decided to speak to this tiger and said, I'm with my family. He was with his wife and his little baby. And he told the tiger, I am here to look for food. Please just let us pass. Well, it snarled at him once, he said, and it eventually just decided to go its way, because there is an understanding between the tiger and the community that dwells within this forest area, because there is a coexistence. While there is also human wildlife conflict, but there is coexistence between humans and wildlife. And I'm very sure the tiger has seen this family and this community being in the area, and they've not been causing harm. And obviously there are a lot of food supply for the tiger within that forest area of the Royal Bloom State Park itself. So there is no conflict that happens in between. Is when the food supply for the tiger declines because of deforestation or because of encroachment or because of forest farm development, is then when these tigers would start attacking communities. Because again, we need to ensure that there is a harmonious balance between the biodiversity for the animals to thrive in and for the humans that live within the area to also live harmoniously with this majestic animals.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. The very evocative. The one of the questions that I often get from my colleagues, including very senior colleagues in the broader planetary health community, is that, you know, the Indigenous perspectives are important. They will acknowledge them, but what they put that up against is the scale of the change that we're seeing around the world. And they say, that's not going to solve the big problems we have if we bring an Indigenous perspective to the global challenges of planetary health. My response to that is that the biggest challenge for planetary health, what underlies all of the challenges that we face together, is the dominant culture. And it's largely a Western culture, as Chiho pointed out in his introductory remarks. And the only hope for the future is to change that culture. And for me, this is a really important aspect of Indigenous understandings, is that the way Indigenous people understand their place in the world as part of nature is where we have to get to. And we obviously have to get there as fast as we can together. That shared understanding, that change of mindset, that change of culture is the fundamental shift we have to see. We're obviously going to have technologies and other things happening at the same time, but if we keep ignoring the fact that the dominant culture is the problem, then we're only going to end up compounding things. And that's one of the fundamental reasons that I think these understandings need to be shared in contexts all around the world.
Dr. Tuan, you have something to add?
Yeah. I think in Vietnam, when we say about the relationship between the human and animal, and I found that the fishery in Vietnam never kill the big animal in the sea because they think that the the big animal like whale or dolphin or dugong fish is a representative of the god of the sea. Therefore, they never kill them. And although they catch many kind of the fish for their life, but they also thinking in spiritual, the big animal is very dangerous, and they have to conservation of them. So the life of them, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So no, I think that maybe we have the 10 minutes more, and I think we better open the floor. Okay. Any mics? Okay.
Yeah, I think better use the question of participation of indigenous communities in the context of the Planetary Health Alliance and the work that it's been done so far yesterday in some of the groups that we were discussing. And it's a real pleasure to hear you, all of you, because I think really it's, Dr. Capon, you said it, it's putting this at the heart of what planetary health is. And I think the perspective of indigenous, I just came from the Amazon before coming here, and it's very beautiful what you presented us in terms of the relationship with the animals and the way they catch the eel, because what I learned is that plants have sensitivities. The fact that a plant grows as a parasite to another plant is because there is a dialogue between the plants, and I learned all that from the indigenous people. So I think I'm very, very emotional, and I'm very happy to see the importance that is given to indigenous people in this context, because they have been doing planetary health probably more than us. Not everything is perfect, not in their world, not in ours. And I think learning and sharing that knowledge is vital. But I had a question related to sanctions, because I think that's something that we can learn as well. I think one of the problems that we face I mean, the crisis generates response, and that's the example of the Blue Mountains where I was many years ago. And the same happened in Colombia with the paramos, in the forest when it's destroyed. So crisis generates response. But the world seems to lack a mechanism for sanctions when it comes to environmental damage. And I love the example that you provided of the river and the sanctions that are imposed. And I don't know to what extent that's something that as a planetary health alliance and movement, we can actually push for. You know, there has to be, I mean, what are all these political sanctions of the global governance mechanisms that we have if there is no real mechanism to make both private sector, governments, and even communities responsible for the damage that we make to the environment? And indigenous people do. And the indigenous people do it in the jungle. If you take something without authorization from the Amazon forest, you will be punished by the forest and by the people that protects the forest. So that's something that I think is very important that we try to explore in a very concrete way as far as what can we promote to develop the mechanism. And I'm not a dictator, but I think what is lacking when it comes to environmental protection is that treaties are not working because there's no compliance. There's no real accountability. There's not a mechanism worldwide to ensure that the justice tribunals or the courts are looking at environmental issues. So, and I think that's an inspiration that comes actually from what you presented. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Do you have any comment about the sanction?
I can only speak on behalf of the Malaysian and Sabah context, because this Sabah generally has native customary laws itself. So we practice while I mean, if you break a law, you will be obviously apprehended by the authorities, but you are also faced with the native and customary law. And that happens in Sabah. And well, given that the fisheries department as well as the state government have already implemented this across since the 70s, it can be replicated, it can be imposed across Malaysia, but it's whether we want to do it. Because right now, I think when it comes to policies and having the will to implement this certain sanctions in rivers across Malaysia can be done, but whether it wants to be done. Because again, Malaysia works in a way where different states have different agencies, have come under different state governments. And while it may work in Sabah, and the system, the river system, the Tagal system, for example, has actually been used and brought to the Royal Belum State Park by the former director, Mr. Shareza. He brought this system to the state park in Peninsular Malaysia, but it only remained there. So I think what can be done is obviously having a deeper understanding of this Tagal system, because I'm speaking for myself that there is, even in Malaysia, there is still a lack of understanding of cultural practices that's happening in Sabah and Sarawak, because there's a huge divide, which is the South China Sea that divides Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak, and also the lack of education, a lack of an education system that provides a deeper understanding of native practices in Malaysia. And this is prevalent, this is known. It is still the communication when I was a kid and people knew that I was from Sabah, the first question people would ask me, like, do you guys still live on trees? And I'm like, yeah, we live on trees, of course. It's still, yeah, like it's weird. It's weird that you're actually asked this question. And sometimes when you come back from Sabah to Peninsula Malaysia, and if this person doesn't know, and they'll tell you like, oh, welcome to Malaysia. And you're like, I was in Malaysia, just a different state. But sanctions like that for the river system would definitely work. It can be done, but whether the will to put it together is the question. And being able to present and speak about the system itself at the Planetary Health Summit, I think it's going to widen the conversation about this, because Malaysia is also on the way of putting together a national planetary health action plan. I'm part of a working group member, and we have consultations with Indigenous groups. So there are more engagement with Indigenous groups. There are more understanding and more conversation with Indigenous groups now that we're laying out this National Planetary Health Action Plan that is led by, of course, Tan Sri Dr. Jamila Mahmud. And thank you very much for your remarks, sir. It is an honor. I was also part of the Indigenous group panel when I was at COP28. So we are taking Indigenous voices global. And I'd like to say thank you everyone for being here for this panel, listening to all of our conversations and presentations.
Okay. Maybe I don't have to summarize this. But anyway, any other speakers would add something to this conversation? No? Okay.
So perhaps to add in relation to sanctions, one of the things that we're not good at yet in planetary health is thinking beyond the national in terms of accountability. If we think about COP28 and the UN climate processes, it's all based on national accounting, where individual nations are responsible for their carbon emissions and for reducing them. It doesn't account for the spillover between particularly high-income countries and other countries, where, for example, in my country of Australia, as well as our own carbon emissions from coal-fired energy, we also export an enormous amount of coal to other countries where it's burned. But the UN would say through its processes that that's not an Australian responsibility. It's okay for Australia to make revenue and sell that coal to other countries in Asia, for example. Now, what I think we have to get better at as a planetary health community is making the argument that the health harms in countries like India, for example, from the burning of Australian coal are not just related to climate change. They're actually the direct harms from the air pollution in the large cities of India, for example. And so we need to be better at articulating that in the research we do. We don't just want to look at what are the local health problems and what are the global perspectives on them. We have to think about the flows and the influences between one nation and another. And once we start to do that, I think we can get serious about putting trade sanctions, for example, on countries. But it's early days in that kind of research.
Thank you. And okay, I think that we have 3 minutes. So if you have a quick question.
Culture also implies rituals, thank you, stories, rituals, celebrations. I think from my experience in Western cultures, celebrating and our relationship and our inherent relationships between ourselves and other parts of the non-human world can be seen as very hippie, very non-mainstream. And I was just curious of what that would look like in your imagination and your perspective if we really embraced relationality in our cities, in Australia, for instance, and brought that cultural paradigm and what, I'm sure that would change our governance, our accountability, social license to operate for a lot of extractivist industries. So it'd be very powerful, but I was just curious about what that kind of cultural shift could look like in your perspective.
I'll open up and others might have a perspective as well. You're absolutely right. We're talking about a huge transformation in the way we understand our place in nature as humans. That image that I had in my presentation of the human at the top of the pyramid versus understanding our place as part of nature rather than dominating nature, which is essentially the current paradigm of development around the world. What would it look like? I think there are lessons from the counterculture that you referred to in terms of, for example, the hippie culture. But I think there are lessons across the world. There's lessons from Indigenous ways of understanding. I think an ecological understanding of human health is much more common beyond the Anglophone world. Like many of us in the planetary health world, as Jamila Mahmood pointed out in her opening remarks, many of the loudest voices are actually from the East Coast of the United States, from the United Kingdom, from Australia, where I'm from, and we have to make room for voices in other languages, for Indigenous voices as we go forward. And as we learn together, we will find the path to that transformation. It seems unbelievable that we could achieve it, but as you said in your comments just now, we have to imagine that it can be different. That's the first step, is to imagine it, and then we need to find a path towards it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe we can continue the discussion 1 more hour, but actually the time is just up. So then we need to close this discussion first. Thank you for coming here, and I hope all of you enjoy the discussion. Thanks.